Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Another Saturdays with Dad.
Hi everyone, I hope everyone's safe.
And today will be quite a long one. It's Dad's favourite albums of the 70s, but we're splitting this into two parts. So today's is 1970 to 74, and then next week's will be 75 to 79.
I think the reason for this is because it was such a defining decade, and when I went through the process of Neve of sort of thinking of all the albums I loved in the 70s, I could have had hundreds, literally. So these are the albums I've actually picked, but there are other albums that you will like that aren't on there. I'm sorry, but this is a personal thing to me. It's not to say that I don't like them. I probably love those albums, but these ones are very special to me.
This is all your opinion, so...
Yeah.
Okay, shall we start? So we're going to start with the year 1970. Here's the first one.
Neil Young, After the Gold Rush. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young were a band I liked a lot, but to me, out of the four of them, the two musicians I liked the most were this guy, Neil Young, and Stephen Stills. This album is just unbelievable. It's some great songs. Oh Lonesome Me, literally After the Gold Rush, Cripple Creek Ferry, which is good. This is just a great album by a great Canadian artist. I think you know by now that we would never go through this decade without one album of this band. When I was going through with Neve my top albums for the 70s, I could have put 5 Dead albums, but I've sort of been quite been not forced, but I've decided to pick one album from each band, and the album I picked for the Dead is American Beauty. And it's not because like Europe 72 or After the Flood or, you know, Terrapin Station are bad albums. They're fantastic, right? It's just this is such a defining album, and I think it is a truly great journey through Americana. And the song Ripple, every time I listen to it, sends shivers down my spine. And this is just a great album. Wonderful. Talking about Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. This is Deja Vu. It's an accumulation of great musicians. Some absolutely blinding songs on this. Carry On. It's just a wonderful song. And there are all sorts of other things on it, Helpless and things like that. It's just a great... I think Helpless is on this. Yeah, it is. Their version of Woodstock. This is a great album by 4 great musicians. And of course the backing, I think Fuzzy Samuel and Dallas Taylor are on this as well. And not forgetting His Lordship Sir Jerry of Garcia. Steel guitar on Teach Your Children. Whoa. The 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus by Spirit. I think this is the most wonderful album. Randy California and Ed Cassidy, they put this album together of fantastic songs. It's sort of like almost folk in some parts, and rock and psychedelic rock and a bit of prog in there. There's all sorts of lovely sort of things going on here that it's truly a wonderful album. So what are we coming to now, Neve? Frank Zappa. Now, a lot of Zappa albums we all like, you know, sort of like Freak Freak Out is a wonderful album. Hot Rats is great and everything. And this is a sort of possibly quasi lesser known album of his, but I just adore it. I just love Road Ladies on this. There's so many things. The Transylvania Boogie.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic on this. This is a wonderful... It's got everything that Zappa has, plus there's a sort of blues attachment to it. And you can hear is just wonderful guitaring. Zappa, to me, this is Frank Zappa at his finest.
This is an Italian impression.
This is, yeah. To all the people that like heavy metal or death metal or anything like that, this is where it all began. This is Black Sabbath's first album. It is simply magnificent. From the opening scenes of the rain and the churchyard bell to the end of the album, it's just fantastic, groundbreaking, and an album that hundreds, if not thousands, of musicians have followed. It has to be in my top albums of the 70s, and an essential album. Black Sabbath, the first album.
Okay, we're now coming on to 1971, which is the most out of all of the years. So, this first one.
Yeah. My favourite Who album, I mean, there are reasons to say Tommy and things like that, but to me, Who's Next is just fantastic. It's got Won't Get Fooled Again, Bubba O'Reilly. It's just the Who at their finest, and of course Keith Moon at his most manic. And so, yeah, the Who's Next. So what we got coming up next? Well, this album has appeared in my top live albums of all time, and it just has to, and I think at the time I said it would be in my 100 greatest albums of all time, possibly even higher than that. The Allman Brothers' finest moment as far as I'm concerned. Live at Fillmore East in 1971, Memory of Elizabeth Reed. It's just Stormy Monday. It's just fantastic. It really Hotlanta is just Whipping Post is probably one of my favourite jam songs. It's just great. So this is the Allman Brothers live in Fillmore 1971. We're now going on to what I consider the greatest soul album of all time. There's obviously compelling reasons to put Stevie Wonder's Innovisions in there, and but I just think What's Going On by Marvin Gaye is incredible. It's a very serious, reflective album. We all know how brilliant Marvin Gaye was, and this album to me is the communion of beauty and wonderment. This is What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. Ho ho! Again, like the Dead, you wouldn't find me with a Beach Boys album that far away. I just love this group. And if I love Pet Sounds, which is my favourite album of all time, one of their other great albums, and to me the greatest album they made off the Pet Sounds, is this one, Surf's Up. It's got fantastic songs. It's got one song, the title track, which actually appears on the Smile sessions, but is in there, and Long Promised Road, Till I Die. It's just absolutely, it's just a miraculous album. But the thing I like more about this album is you get to hear, Brian and Dennis have got great voice, but you hear Carl's voice more in this, and it's such a wonderful voice that he had. And I think this is such a brilliant album. So this is Surf's Up by the Beach Boys. We had the Doors in the Strange Days in the 60s, but had this been made in the 60s, I think it would have supplanted it, because I believe, for me, this is their finest moment as a band. Unfortunately, this is the last studio album they made before Jim Morrison passed away. But what a legacy they left. Riders on the Storm, Don't You Love Her Madly, L'America. It's just an LA band at their absolute finest. LA Woman by the Doors. I suppose that this is the easiest cop-out, but I really do love this album. I kind of prefer the first album, really, but I just love this. Not because of, although wonderful that it is, Stairway to Heaven, but I love this for two songs. The opening song, Black Dog, which is incredible, but their version of When the Levee Breaks, man, that is so good. This is one of the truly great rock albums of all time. So this is Led Zeppelin. It's called Led Zeppelin, but I look at it as Led Zeppelin 4 for obvious reasons.
An essential.
Right, we're now going to enter into a realm which is not just me, but it's also my daughter Neve as well. At her age, I was also listening to prog music a lot. So what we're going to see is a lot of prog coming up now. And the first one, well, Genesis Nursery Crime. I love Selling England by the Pound, and that is just an incredible album, but I think this has more in it sentimental. It wins because it has more of a sentimental value to me, because I saw them in 1972 when they were playing this, and they were unbelievable. This to me is their greatest album. I mean, I've always been a big Genesis fan, but more or less Genesis with Peter Gabriel in it. But this to me is the epitome of prog music. It's beautiful. I'm going to get into Neve's good books here. When I was Neve's age again, sorry, going back about this, I adored this band. Now, had it been down to me, like with the Dead, I would have had more Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I loved them. I really thought they were a great band. But I had to, nail my colours to the mast, as they say, and pick the one album they made which meant a lot to you, or to me rather, and that is Tarkus. I love Tarkus. It was a close run thing between that and Brain Salad Surgery, but I love this album. It just reminds me of my youth, and it's three absolute magnificent musicians. It's pretty as good as it gets, really. So that's Tarkus by Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
On to one I don't think we've talked a lot about on the channel.
Let's go to Deutschland. It's a neue album. This one is Tago Mago by Can. A formative force in progressive European rock from Germany, I believe Munich, Can. And in this album, Tago Mago, there is so much going on, and it's just really out there. I mean, it's just completely out there, and probably when I first heard it, I never heard anything like this. But it is a true classic album. If you like prog rock and you like experimental music, you like this. But if you like sort of Ed Sheeran or something like that, I'd stay well clear of that. Neve and I sort of tend to differ on this, but I can't help it. To me, this is their greatest album. Oh, one of these days we can go on about the first side, but really, also the greatness that is Echoes. To me, this is Pink Floyd. They're just at their best. Echoes, it's just comes in and out and sways. It's so melodic. It's so wonderful. I would say this, to me, is my favourite Pink Floyd album of all time. So this is Medal by Pink Floyd. Jethro Tull. This was really difficult for me, because had it been in another decade, I'd have picked that and then, Thick as a Brick. But I had to pick one, and I choose Aqualung. It's one of the first albums I ever bought, and I think everybody in the band that I played just loved it, just loved the album. We tried to play a couple of songs from it. Obviously, we failed miserably, but this is, to me, their greatest album. And again, it's not by much, because Thick as a Brick is really up there, and things like Stand Up and Benefit are good, but to me, this is my favourite Jethro Tull album. So this is Aqualung by Jethro Tull.
Now on to 1972.
It's sort of straying a bit, so this isn't exactly Neve's cup of tea, but as you can see from my T-shirt, I love this group. I know it's just sort of like people will say, why on earth are you picking the great bands of the 70s? Why are you picking this? Because this is my selection. and I think, but this album, Gypsy Cowboy by the New Riders of the Purple Sage, it's one of my favourite country rock albums. And they were so underrated. Buddy Cage, the steel guitarist, and also the wonderful voice of John Marmaduke Dawson. I just love this album. I did have a chance to see the New Riders live. I missed them in '72, and I was really excited because Bill Graham announced a greeting from San Francisco concert in the summer in London at Wembley. I got tickets, everything was produced and everything, and posters and everything, and there was Santana, the Dead, the New Riders. I think even Quicksilver maybe mentioned as well. They cancelled it. It was one of my biggest regrets, but this album is brilliant. Now, people say on her well, basically they say things like Sticky Fingers, Let It Bleed, Get Your Ya-Ya's Out. But to me, the Rolling Stones at their finest, Exile on Main Street. Absolutely magnificent. To me, Tumbling Dice, just the whole album itself is just wonderful. It's one of the truly great albums of the 70s. Mick and the boys having it large. This is Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. Those who are familiar with Yes probably have their own view on what should be the best album they made in the 70s. But to me, I love Fragile. I just think it's there. With the first album, which I liked, which was in the 60s, that was good. But this one is the one that I love the most, and sort of like roundabout things like that. It's just great. It's just a great album, and I recommend it to anyone. So this is Fragile by Yes. To me, no music epitomised the 70s at its finest than by David Bowie. And to me, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars is one of the truly great albums by David Bowie. There are other great albums. I like Station to Station, but this is such a hugely influential album. And the musicians, not least, Mick Ronson, the guitarist. What a guitarist. Suffragette City, you can't get finer than that. That's David Bowie and Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Now moving into 1973.
Ooh, Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells. And this is the guy. This album made Richard Branson. It was made on a shoestring, and he was sort of like a child prodigy, and sort of it didn't actually capture the public's imagination until a horror film came out called The Exorcist, which had a lot of Tubular Bells on this, and then it just suddenly exploded. And I think basically this album made Virgin Records for Richard Branson. It's an unbelievable album. It's a complete instrumental, as probably everybody on this chat probably knows, but it's just an essential album of the 70s. Definitely Tubular Bells.
Okay, so you're gonna have to point out which one it is in there. This is all the studio albums, but one in particular is one you like, isn't it?
This one, I think that's that one here. You probably may not see it.
Why don't you just say it?
So that album is Desperado by the Eagles. I saw them in 1975. I think it was one of the last gigs that Bernie Leadon played with the Eagles before Joe Walsh came. I saw them at Wembley. They were amazing. And I love the Eagles. I mean, there's so many other albums of the Eagles. Not just I just like that. There's so many other albums by it, but something about the Eagles. I love Desperado, Dueling Dalton. It's just a fantastic album, and you know, I love Americana, I love American country rock as well, and that is just brilliant. So that's Desperado by the Eagles. The quintessential, I would say, producer, musician, singer, arranger is Todd Rundgren. Todd Rundgren has made loads of albums for different bands as well as himself. The reason why I love this is prog at its finest, and this has got some fantastic stuff. It is such a brilliant album. There's a Wizard, a True Star, just one victory on it, and there's a whole load of stuff going on, international feel, and also the soul medley in that, and it just gives a chance for everyone to listen to the wonderful voice that Todd has. And this is just an amazing, amazing album, and I can't do a top 70s without having that. So that's a Wizard, a True Star by Todd Rundgren.
Right, on to the last year, which is 1974.
Ooh. My second favourite Bob Dylan album, Blood on the Tracks. Just fantastic. It's Tangled Up in Blue. I mean, it's just, that's one of my favourite songs, that time, and the whole atmosphere of the album is great. It's just a real return to Bob Dylan at his finest, and I think if you like that kind of music, and you don't know this album, which I would find surprising, you should have it. This is Blood on the Tracks by Bob Dylan.
Right, this is one that a lot of people have been talking about, as in my videos they say, well, where is your Tangerine Dream album? So this one's going to be in the video
here we
today.
Go. So this is Tangerine Dream, and it's Phaedra, which is obviously their musical journey based on Racine's book Phaedra. It is a wonderful album, pure German electronic music at its absolute finest. Edgar Froese, Peter Baumann are just wonderful musicians, and this is a symphonic green. And of course, we will be discussing in the next video between 75 and 79 the greatness that is Klaus Schulze, and it's no coincidence that he also was a founder member of Tangerine Dream, a wonderful band. I saw them at the Alma Hall. They were very good, yeah.
I didn't know you've seen
Yeah.
them. Next is one I think we're all familiar with.
So, as we get from the 60s into the 70s, we can't really go in progressive music without alluding to King Crimson, and particularly this album, Red. This is a fantastic album. It's full of just all sorts of good stuff, jazz, and prog. It's just got everything in it, and it sort of basically shows off the great musicianship of not just Robert Fripp, but David Cross, John Wetton, and Bill Bruford, the drummer. And to me, if you like King Crimson, this is a must. Red by King Crimson, a brilliant album.
And the last album for our video today, ending it on a prog album.
Yep. So this is Mirage, not to be confused by Mirage by Klaus Schulze. This is the Mirage by Camel. Again, another prog band of the early 70s who I thought were absolutely incredible. It's just so experimental. There's again the usual sort of thing that you get with prog. You get inventiveness, you get different styles, different time signatures and everything like that. It's just on the move the whole time. It's an absolute stonker of an album. So this is Camel Mirage.
So that's the end of the first part. Next week's will be, as I said, 75 to 79, which will probably be a bit different to the album shown today.
I think so. I mean, if I may just say one thing, Neve, obviously, because we're running out of time, I missed out one album which would definitely have been on it as well. I just completely forgot about it, which of course is Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel, which is a wonderful album.
So as I said, there's going to be different atmosphere in next week's video. Any closing thoughts on this period of time?
Well, this period of time, it can be, I mean, the 70s was such a great decade in so many ways, because within 10 years you had different stratas of music coming forward. I mean, we'd come out of the experimental 60s and got into a sort of a more mainstream rock, and then also the progressive music came through, and then as we went through that, we had, you know, the upsurge in reggae, people like Bob Marley and the Wailers, and soul, wonderful soul stuff. I mean, not just Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, but Earth, Wind and Fire, all these great bands, of course the Bee Gees. And then we sort of finished up in that decade with sort of, obviously, the burgeoning punk movement, which then sort of metamorphosised itself into sort of new wave, which we'll all be discussing next weekend.
Yep.
But
I hope everyone enjoyed that. This one's been quite a long video, but hopefully it's been informative.
hopefully you enjoyed it.
Alright, we'll see you next week. I'll probably see you all tomorrow. See ya!
Goodbye, see you next Saturday.